Let's go ahead and go.
Yep. All right, thank you very much for being here. As everybody comes in, we're going to begin with a brief presentation and then our program. Thank you.
I started smoking and pot and drinking when I was 18.
I didn't just do meth, I did anything I could get my hands on.
I went from being a vital, productive teenager to a strung out, homeless prostitute.
I was 10, I had to call the police and tell them that I didn't know what was wrong with my mom. I didn't understand, I didn't know it was the alcohol.
One is too many and 1,000 is never enough. I literally had 1,000 pills when I had my last overdose.
I thought I was just trying to have fun, social with the right people because I had always had a hard time making friends.
I injected meth off and on for most of 10 years, and during that time I was fired from almost every job that I had.
You couldn't have told me I would have ended up like that. But now I know there was a reason for everything, and this has taken me all the way from the outhouse and the alleyways to the White House.
I never knew that it was a place that I could come to with my children and do what I need to do for me as well as my children.
I used to throw out her liquor, and I didn't even care if I got in trouble. I helped her a lot, I think. We both went through it together, so I was in this program too.
The turning point for me was having my substance abuse disorder treated as a separate disorder. It was always seen as an outgrowth of my mental health disorder. And when I got treatment, when I was put into a rehab for the first time, not only did I learn more about what it meant to be an addict, I also learned tools about what recovery meant in general, and I was able to apply those recovery tools to my mental illness as well, and found that it was good for both.
I'm happy I finally learned about anger management and using my boundaries and learning skills when I stopped using drugs. I mean, that's a miracle, changing.
It's given me hope, better understand who I am, what addiction is all about, how it affects lives, and ultimately it's given me knowledge and wisdom so I can pass on to others.
It means, changing a life for a person, but more than just changing a life for that person, it means changing the lives of every person that meets and deals with, whether it's his family or his co-workers.
The structure, the health insurance, the support of the people that I work with, which is phenomenal. They all participate in my recovery. They understand it as a disease. They don't see it as, a weakness or something, that is to be hidden or ashamed of.
They taught me how to be a mom. They taught me that I had some qualities inside of me.
She been through it, so I'm not gonna go through it now. So it's like, yeah, I'm gonna go to college. And I'm the oldest. So it seemed like I gotta go to college, finish college, have a good job, and maybe have a family.
Recovery gave me that opportunity to take that other road for a change. And every day I wake up with having to make that decision. Either the good red road or that dark hole, black hole road, which leads to illness for not only myself, but also for community and for family.
Now I have passion about what I do, and that helps me stay clean because I love the work that I do. And I own a home, and I'm able to parent my child, and the miracles just keep happening.
Recovery opens up to every individual a wonderful new life. A life where there's great tolerance of others, a life where there's happiness and joy, a life where there is comfort and satisfaction.
The faith community is getting more organized as a result of the White House, as a result of President Bush acknowledging us and President Bush showing a sincere concern for individuals that are in recovery.
To be able to become the person you were supposed to be is not something that all of us get to do, but you do in recovery.
Well, good morning, and a very hearty welcome to each and every one of you to the White House Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives Compassion in Action Roundtable. I want to welcome each of you. I want to thank SAMHSA for that tremendous video. I think no matter what else we talk about today, that frames it all. That's what it all ultimately boils down to: one heart, one life transformed. Take just a moment to look around you. You are in very good company. There are some tremendously innovative public leaders, some academics that offer real insight into what works and what doesn't and how we can make things better. There are some of America's great social entrepreneurs. There are people from large organizations and from small ones. There are people from faith-based organizations and from non-religious groups. There are stodgy conservatives and reckless liberals. But what knits us together is a very simple shared conviction, and that is that every human being, no matter what their background is, no matter what their experience, no matter what their status, education level, no matter how far they may have seemed to have fallen, is of immeasurable worth. And that for each of them, it is worth doing what it takes to offer the hand up, to send the helicopter back to the rescue, to leave the 99 healthy sheep in the pen and go out and find the one that was lost. That also means that we're knit together by a sense of burden. We can't just look away from the individual whose life has been corroded by addiction. We can't just look away from the family or the children, the spouse, the whole communities that have been torn apart by substance abuse. This is a heavy weight because we know that when it comes to addiction, that every victory, even the smallest ones, will be very hard fought. But we are also knit together by a sense of hope, that things can be improved, that things can get better, that we can make a difference when we knit together and bring together the very best of American ingenuity with the very best of American compassion. And that is the charge of the President's Faith-Based and Community Initiative: real results for our neighbors in need. Certainly, government has resources and a reach that nothing else can match, but neither is there anything that can compare to that touch of the organization that is rooted on the same corner as the challenges that it addresses, that draws upon scores of dedicated volunteers, that's there rooted in the community, that answers the phone after most government employees have gone home, that have a deep personal commitment to the people they serve. And the work of the President's Faith-Based and Community Initiative is to strengthen these organizations and to increasingly partner their unique strengths with the efforts of government. That is the quiet transformation that is being worked out not only by the Faith-Based and Community Initiative at the White House, but in the Faith-Based and Community Initiative centers that are actually located all throughout government in 12 different agencies, all the major ones that have social services. That's the vision of the President's Prisoner Reentry Initiative, which connects returning ex-offenders with local nonprofits, faith-based, and community organizations. And to date, the ex-offenders that have been aided by this program are recidivating, returning to prison at rates less than half of what would have been predicted for their population. That's the vision of PEPFAR in Africa, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. More than 80% of the partners are small indigenous organizations in Africa. To date, more than 1 million lives have been saved through this. And more than 2 million AIDS orphans are in care because of PEPFAR. It's also the vision of the Malaria Communities Program and the Mentoring Children of Prisoners Program and the Compassion Capital Fund and virtually every other major effort currently underway to address human need at the federal level. And as you know, that is the vision that animates access to recovery, enabling state governments as never before to tap into the unique capabilities of faith-based and community nonprofit organizations to overcome substance abuse and addiction. So each of our panelists and speakers today are going to shed a kind of a unique light on that particular project. What the challenges have been, where the victories are, what we can continue to do to make it even more effective. And so now to start things off for our keynote address, we are very privileged to have John Walters, the Director of the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy, better known as the nation's drug czar, which is probably the coolest title in all of Washington. Under Director Walters' watch, we have seen drug use among youth in America drop 23%. And I think it's very significant to note that Director Walters is the type of guy who brings together an uncompromising approach to illegal drugs with a deep commitment to helping struggling individuals overcome addiction. In other words, he's the type of guy that would throw a drug dealer through a plate glass window and then go and pick him up and mentor him on the road to a new life. Please welcome Director Walters.
Thank you. I never had an introduction that said that I was the kind of guy who would assault people, but it's not necessarily a denial, but it's a little bit blunt. Thank you for the kind introduction, but most of all, thank all of you. Many of you have been kind enough to not only work with us, but allow me to visit you where you work and save lives, and that's obviously what this is about. And I know that the President could not be happier that we have been able to push the vision that he had to the point where we're able to work more effectively with you, the people you lead, the people that are working with you to save lives. We do have an indirect responsibility, although I think as the President has laid down the guidance, it is important. We don't save individual people. You do, and the people you work with do. And that is the thing that has to get done, and that is the thing that has to be supported. The question is, how do we properly do that? And I think the change that we've tried to bring about is no clearer than how it started in terms of the Access to Recovery program. We're going to talk about a little more today in the context of the other initiatives that Judd talked about. It started right after this administration started, and the President, as some of you know, came to us and to members of HHS and said, first thing I want to do is close the treatment gap. I want to help people who come and seek treatment and don't get it, get that treatment. How big is it? What does it cost? And we had, some of you have heard and worked with us on it, the best estimate we had, not that people who needed it, but as you know, this disease doesn't cause people necessarily to come forward. You have to go get them, and sometimes that is a long process. But we had an estimate of 100,000 people seeking treatment each year that not getting it. We had an estimate of cost of $2,000 for all modalities per individual. And that's why the initial request for access to recovery was $200 million. The President proposed to unilaterally close the gap. But he also said something very different from the way this was talked about before as an equal priority. I want to remove the bigotry that has people of faith, many of whom represent the reason why many people are in recovery today. I want to remove the bigotry that keeps them from fully participating in helping with resources provided by the government. I think that was the most controversial part of this proposal. Not that we don't support people of faith and people of government and nonprofits that are not faith-oriented, but that and I think that's why it's so important. We had a force built up, as many of you know, in the publicly funded programs that was not neutral. It was bigoted against faith. And it also kept us from being what the research showed us was important, effective in supporting recovery. It wasn't just the intensity of treatment, 28 days, 90 days, a year. It was the ability to reintegrate people into communities. And something that faith communities, churches, community organizations have been doing with jobs and family counseling and housing and other things, but we're not able to be a participant fully integrated. I'm not saying we're entirely there, but we have created bonds that hadn't existed before. The president wanted this to be twice as big. And well, obviously, we would like to see this grow and continue. We're glad that it's continued its permanent form, but we need it to be bigger. We want it to grow, as I know you do. But many revolutions have started small, with individuals, sometimes with 12 individuals, and they change the world. So you're doing that, and we are not. And the president is not under any illusion that the most important partners in this are you, and I mean that because your success, your hard work, your prayers and tears, and getting up when things fall down and helping others get up when they fall down is what gets us there. And I couldn't help but be struck again watching the video presentation how, as horrible as this disease is, which many of you have known much more firsthand than even I, as horrible as this disease is, the people who come through it and their families are not only different people, they are stronger people. I mean, what Mike Deaver said at the end is quite striking, that the adversity is not about kind of just making the pain stop, that there is a kind of change in reorienting you to be concerned with the people around you that you never thought of before, and reorienting the people who live with you in a way they never thought of before. And it makes us live the ideal of citizenship or brotherly love or simple care for our fellow human beings in a way we haven't before. And not only does our country need that and our communities need that, but the world needs that. And the ability to export that phenomenon of U.S. Policy is enormously important to save lives and to change the face of people living around the world. I want to just summarize some of what's been achieved here before I allow you to turn over the rest of the program to you and those here who are going to talk about the future here. The 3 years of access to recovery has helped more than 170,000 people with substance abuse problems receive treatment and or recovery support services. The original target with the program as it was finally funded was 125,000, so you have exceeded that target quite substantially. 37% of clients have received clinical treatment support. 63 of them have received recovery support services. 52% of the funds have gone to treatment and 48% to support recovery support. We've attracted, most importantly, a whole new cohort, as I said, of treatment and recovery support providers, many of whom were out there and were able to be linked, many of whom were able to receive additional resources to expand their important work. Faith-based organizations now constitute 22% of the recovery support services and 31% of the clinical treatment providers in the program. It gives those suffering and their families for the first time real and genuine choice, where to go, what is best for me, to optimize the chances that I will be successful. It also provides a way to, an example, a living example with real results and real achievements to say how what have been thought to be constitutional impediments for helping organizations that are faith-based do not have to be impediments to making progress in this area. We have shown that we can provide funding and choice and community support and governmental partnership in a way that is fully consistent with the principles of government and the ability of the government to carry out programs through your help. We've also had the ability to follow up on some of the clients that have been discharged. 71.4% have been abstinent from drugs and alcohol at discharge. 22.3% report they're in stable housing that weren't before. 29.3% are employment that weren't before. 59.5% have become connected through self-help groups and individuals in their lives that help to stabilize their recovery that weren't in that position before. 84.7% have reported no involvement in criminal justice system at discharge. Again, the program is new, so we want to follow longitudinally what happens here. But as in the case with some of the other initiatives that Judd talked about, the results compared to similar cohorts in other cycles are not only equal, but they're better. And that shows that the principles that were the reasons this came into existence, part of the President and the part of those who supported it, have been enormously proven to be sound. What do we want to do now? We want to fine-tune some of these partnerships to enhance the capacity to work together, to expand. There still is a great need to help to work in outreach and bringing more people into support. We would like to help to have this expand not only with the direct funding, but with taking this knowledge and tying it to what we can do with other monies, both private and public, that are beyond this, as well as continue and argue for these sustained supports. We'd like to have better coordination between clinical treatment and recovery support. Obviously, one of the principles here was to take the part of substance abuse that is the lifelong challenge, that is getting stable recovery, and putting resources and emphasis on that in addition to treatment. We want to continue to empower individuals, not only those who are providing the support, but also obviously those who are receiving that, to pick and have first-rate help, the best that we can give as a community and a nation. And finally, we want to make sure we continue to evaluate to be able to sustain these. You know, it's a competitive environment for individuals' time and money, for government money and government attention. Evaluation can sometimes be seen as a costly pain in the neck. I think the best programs do this because they know they need to show people what's working, and they know they need to know what they need to do to improve themselves. They want to be doing the best job possible, and they know that credible and appropriate evaluation is the way to know that. Many times that evaluation doesn't fit the form of some of the scientific or social scientific evaluation structures, but most of it helps us show the strength and to give hope. There are people who have hope because of their faith. There are people who have hope because of their experience, and there are people who have hope because it's written in a report. We need everybody. I'll work with the godless if it'll help us defeat the devil. That's what we're going to have to do, and I think that's an important recognition that I think many organizations, both faith-centered and those that aren't, have seen as a critical element in the maturing of this process to help to gauge. I really do think you're in the forefront of revolution, not only for the care of people who suffer from substance abuse, but for the future of our country and its institutions, of not making public and religion enemies. And unfortunately, there was, I think, a tendency to walk down that path or to see the mixture as somehow suspect and dangerous. I think what we're seeing is the acceptance of the fact that the country is rooted on and strong because it's both faithful and because it's tolerant and because it's united on principles that do not involve bigotry when they involve faith. In fact, they make us more tolerant, more caring, and more just. So thank you again for the tireless work you have given, the sharing, the willingness to help us learn, and your patience with the clumsy form of the federal government. Maybe refer to the title of drug czar. The only people who think this is cool don't have the title. I like to say it's probably better than drug Caesar, which of course is the derivative from, or drug lord, which would mean I'm on the wrong side. But what's wrong with it is it suggests that someone's going to come and do something for you that you don't have to do yourself. And the key that I know from my job and that you know from your work is the country is about the people. The country is not about somebody somewhere else fixing things for you. The hard thing to learn is that the cavalry actually comes from a higher authority. It doesn't really come from a fort out of Washington. So thank you for being on the front line and for making us strong. And congratulations, you're a remarkable example.
All right, thank you, Director Walters. It is now my great pleasure to introduce to you Ramey Judkins. Ramey is a 2006 graduate of the Next Door Residential Transition Program in Nashville. But she's not just a graduate, she is now the residential manager of the downtown Nashville Residential Transition Facility. And Ramey and I had a chance to talk just a little bit yesterday when we were doing the walkthrough, and I asked her, at the end of her life, how would she want to be remembered? And she said to me 3 things. She said, as an overcomer, as someone who's overcome the great obstacles she's faced, as a good mother to her daughter, and as someone who has helped people who are up against the same great obstacles that she's faced overcome those obstacles. And as you'll see, she is all of those things and more. So, Ramey, welcome.
Good morning. I would like to take this opportunity to tell you about my personal healing through the Next Door program and the impact it had on my life and the lives of those very dear to me, in particular my daughter. Before coming to the Next Door, my life was in turmoil. I was tormented by substance abuse, depression, and recidivism. I was no longer part of my family or a part of my daughter's life. I had lost everything, including myself. It was difficult for me to believe in anything or to have faith, because my disease would tell me that a God that loved me would protect me and not allow me to destroy my life with substance abuse. One day, my daughter came to me with one final plea. She bargained with me to get clean and straighten my life up just long enough for me to attend our high school graduation. And of course, I promised her I'd be there, but I had no idea as to how I would fulfill the promise I had made. Sadly enough, after making that promise, I got high. I went right back into the same old way of living without giving any more thought to her request. But shortly thereafter, I found myself to be absolutely miserable. Her words constantly plagued me, and I knew that I could not let her down. I also realized that in spite of the life I had chosen, she still looked up to me. Children do model their parents. I knew that only I could break the cycle and be a good example for my daughter. Surely I didn't want her to believe that the only way she could have a mother is to become a part of the life I was living. All I needed to do at this point was to pray and ask God to help me, because I was unable to help myself, or even to pull myself out of my addiction. The drug would not let me go. Every day I would say, I'm just waiting for my change, and pray that God would keep me until my change would come. Praises be to God, my change did come quickly. It came in the form of incarceration. It was not the change I expected. I expected for God to make it easy for me, especially since I had a graduation to attend. I expected to awaken one day as a new person with my life intact. At this point, the thought of incarceration had left me feeling lost and with no hope for a better life. I had always gone to jail, leave with a fresh start, and eventually return to the same lifestyle of active addiction. Instead, this time God intervened and led me to the Next Door program, where I had to become honest with myself about my addiction, and then I was able to begin the hard race to the finish line. As an addict, admission and recovery were always very difficult steps for me to take, because first I had to acknowledge that I had a serious problem, and next I had to become willing to let go of the habits of my old way of life. I had a choice in the kind of treatment and services that I could receive to affect my recovery. I was provided with case management, one-on-one counseling, and I was able, with their help, to have an individualized program to address my issues and my recovery. The program also provided services of med management, which helped me to address my depression. At the Next Door, I found hope, compassion, encouragement, responsibility, self-esteem, and most of all, a chance to change my life. I was surrounded by people that were genuinely concerned, that I knew that I possessed the skills and the will to do better, to change my life. Important core values of the program were instilled in me that enabled me to learn how to live again. They were faith, hope, wholeness, responsibility, respect, encouragement, and community. At the Next Door, I learned to trust and have faith. They gave me the hope I needed to walk down the road of recovery. I learned respect for myself and for others, and to be encouraging to those who were also struggling. I learned the importance of community. We were a group of people who shared a common interest. As a result, those core values helped me to develop a life of wholeness and hope. It was at the Next Door that I finally came to the realization that I was ready for a new life, a life that demonstrates that I am much more than my addiction, a chance for a life of fulfillment, and a renewed life with my daughter. For this, I am truly grateful. Today, by the grace of God and this wonderful program, I am a recovering addict who is responsible and a productive member of society. I've been blessed to be reunited with my daughter, who never gave up on me, and who believed that one day I would stop abusing myself and be her mother again. I thank God for the hope and faith she had in me and for her constant encouragement. In May of this year, 2007, I did attend her high school graduation. And I'm now a vibrant part of her life. I'm someone she can depend on and look to for support and stability. This fall, she began her freshman year at Vanderbilt University as a Vanderbilt Scholar. I think this is a blessing that God chose Vanderbilt for her to attend, as it is a local university, and this presents the great joy for us to be close and bond. And looking back, it was her graduation that I realized that God is not finished with me. For it reads in 2 Corinthians 5:17, "Therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. All things are passed away. Behold, all things are becoming new. Therefore, my journey had just begun." In addition to helping to restore my life, the Next Door was also instrumental in helping to restore my career. It gave me the opportunity to use my skills and my knowledge to work as resident case manager for its Freedom Recovery community. I will now be able to help women just like myself who are seeking help through this program. It is my dream to give back to the Next Door by creating an environment in which women will be reunited with their children, just as I was blessed to be reunited with my daughter. These women will be able to work, have their children with them, while restoring their lives and the lives of their children, and also to rebuild their life, coping, and working skills. Indeed, it is an esteemed honor for me to be a part of a program whose belief and desire is to effect a change and to serve all women and their children who are in crisis by equipping them with lives of wholeness and hope. In closing, I would just like to say that my struggle is not over. The Next Door has encouraged me and taught me well, but it's now all up to me, my faith, my decisions, my choices, and my belief that we do recover. I would also like to say that I hear the voice of the Good Shepherd, and I do not hear the voice of a stranger. My steps are ordered by the Lord. I will be at the right place, at the right time, with the right people, doing the right thing. Thank you.
Well, we can all go home now. That's wonderful, Ramey. Thank you so much. Well, it's now a pleasure to introduce Dr. Terry Klein, who is the administrator for SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. And I'll just simply direct you to Dr. Klein's bio. It is a very impressive bio, but I will note this. What is very apparent is that I think what makes Dr. Klein such an effective leader at the federal level is that each of the facets of ATR, the federal, the state, the provider level, including the research side, he has served with distinction in each of those realms. At the state level, as the Secretary of Health in Oklahoma, at the provider level, as the clinical director for the Cambridge Youth Guidance Center in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and he's even been a clinical instructor at the Department of Psychiatry at the Harvard Medical School. So there's even more, actually, believe it or not, in his bio, but I'll let you read that for yourself. Please welcome Dr. Terry Klein.
Good morning, everyone. Let me start by thanking Ramey for sharing that incredible story. The story of your struggles as well as the struggle of your strengths and the hope of recovery. And by being here today and telling us your story directly, you're really representing hundreds of thousands of people across our country who are on that journey to recovery. And I want to thank you for making that so clear for us this morning. So thank you, Ramey. Also, I'd like to thank Director Walters for being here and the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy, as well as Jay Hine and the White House Office of Faith-Based and Community Services and Congress, who have all come together to make ATR, Access to Recovery, a reality across America. So it's a pretty remarkable accomplishment to have all of these forces coming together as one to make this come to pass. I also would like to thank all of the grantees who have been engaged in this first round of Access to Recovery. You really are the pioneers, you really are the adventurers who took this concept, who took the funding, went out there and transformed your systems to make sure that this recovery was a reality for hundreds of thousands of people across our country. We heard that 170,000 people who have actually benefited from these services across the country. So you have had that pioneering spirit. So I want to thank you for that. The need, we know, is incredibly great in our country. A survey that was just released September 6th, so it's only a few weeks old, tells us that in 2006 there were 23.6 million people in our country who were in need of substance abuse services. 23.6 million, a huge number. Of that number, 2.5 million actually received services from a specialty facility. So a huge gap that exists. So the need is very, very clear for this type of service, and we see that need before us every single day. Now, when you multiply that by all of those individuals, and we heard it in Ramey's story and we heard it in the testimonials earlier, we're not talking about the impact on just those individuals. We're talking about the impact on husbands, on wives, on children, on fathers, aunts, teachers, people in community. The ripple effect is incredible. And when those needs are unaddressed, the effect for our country, the impact, can be devastating. So the stakes, indeed, are very, very high. With this program, what we've really seen is, as Director Walters noted, this is really an innovative program that is pushing the limits of every boundary that has existed. The three primary principles that are in action with ATR. One is around consumer choice. It really shouldn't be a surprise. We should know that when individuals are more engaged and more responsible for their own treatment and their recovery, the outcomes will be better. So actively involve them in making those decisions about what supports will help them get on the path and sustain their own recovery. Engage individuals to make those decisions themselves. So, consumer choice, a huge piece of this. As we also heard, outcomes. We need to be outcomes oriented. And of course, that number one priority is making sure that people are abstinent from drugs and that there's a complete absence of alcohol and substance use. But we know there are many other things that are critical for someone to maintain their pathway and that journey to recovery. And those include things like stable housing, getting and keeping a good job. If you're a student, making sure that you stay enrolled in school. A decrease with criminal justice system, and also making certain that you have those social supports that you need to stay on that path to recovery. Now the last piece is around increased capacity. And we're not talking just about increasing the absolute number of services that are available. We're actually talking about increasing the scope and types of services that are available to individuals, again, to support them on that pathway to recovery. Now, there are many pathways to recovery, as most of the people in this room I know understand. And the pathway that is the right pathway for Ramey may be a very different pathway for me, or a different pathway for each of you in this room. So you need to have a range of services and supports that are available to help support your own individual recovery. And that may include faith-based organizations, community organizations, medical detox, inpatient, outpatient, recovery support services, an entire continuum of services we know are critical, and then you are able to build on those strengths that you have in your own community to put those principles into action. And what was interesting is that there is, I believe, a great hungering, a great thirst to provide these types of services in our country. When these grants were released in 2004, when these were made available, we had 44 states who applied for these grants, and we had 22 tribal organizations and territories, a huge number. Almost every single state and a huge number of tribal organizations and territories that saw value in this program and applied. And unfortunately, we were only able to fund a small number of those. As Director Walters noted, the request was made, the number came in at much less than the request, so we were able to provide those to a smaller number. You'll hear from several of those states who actively are transforming their systems right here today. The exciting news is that we will be able to continue this transformation of systems across our country and actually see the President's vision continue, which includes this active participation of faith-based organizations and community service organizations in addition to the rest of this continuum. So this is an exciting time. And today, right now, we are announcing $98 million additional dollars for ATR grants, which will help increase access for an estimated 160,000 people over the next 3 years. This is good news indeed. Now, of this $98 million, approximately $2 million will be used for an evaluation, an independent evaluation of the program. As Director Walters noted, it is very important that we are able to demonstrate the outcomes, and I believe the successes of this program, so that our funders see that, so all those that we're accountable to see the advantages and see the success of this program. So the individual stories are important. We also need to have the outcomes and the data to be able to do this. Through this, what we're really seeing with this increased treatment capacity and consumer choice is we are targeting 18 states, 5 tribal organizations with these new dollars, and the District of Columbia. So that's a clue to the District of Columbia that they're included in that. The 3-year grants, which I will now note, are being awarded to the states of Arizona, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Hawaii, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, Missouri, New Mexico, Ohio, Oklahoma, Rhode Island, Tennessee, Texas, Washington, and Wisconsin. That's great news. Now, I'm not finished, though. In addition, the Alaska South Central Foundation, California Rural Indian Health Board, Intertribal Council of Michigan, Inc., Montana-Wyoming Tribal Leaders Council, Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma, and the District of Columbia will also receive awards. So please join me in a round of applause for all of these states. Now, as you might have noted, I think there are a few people who actually are from those areas, those organizations, in the audience. So those that I know of, I'd like to congratulate you personally and just to note you. So I want to congratulate in person Joseph Federici, who's joined us this morning from representing Alaska through the Alaska South Central Foundation. Or if you're here, could you just raise your hand? May not be actually in the room. That's a long distance. Linda Fisher, representing the District of Columbia, right back here. Through the Addiction Prevention and Recovery Administration, John Gastorf from Oklahoma, representing the Cherokee Nation. There's John. And in addition, among these 24 grantees, you also are about to hear, and they're a little bit on the spot here, panelists who will be coming up next. The 3 panelists who will be describing their own transformation in their state. And hopefully they're not too distracted by the news of having received those grants, which are renewals. So I will congratulate them as I introduce them. But for one last time, just to please join me in congratulating all of our new grantees for the next 3 years. Thank you. I'd now like to invite up our 3 panelists who will talk about their experiences in the state and with the tribal organizations. And we will start with Bill Halsey. And I would encourage you to look in the program, look at the bios. I will not go into that in depth. You'll see that there are decades worth of very diverse experiences represented, including very interesting backgrounds, a registered nurse and social workers and restorative justice backgrounds, and people who I think have demonstrated this incredible commitment to the work, and it's no wonder that we've seen this transformation. I'm going to mention all three and then turn it over to the first panelist. We have Bill Halsey, who is the Access to Recovery Project Manager from the Connecticut Department of Mental Health. We have Vicki Sandiford O'Connor, who is a Social Wellness Program Manager and Project Director with the California Rural Indian Health Board. We have Michael Duffy, who is the Assistant Secretary for the Department of Health and Hospitals in the state of Louisiana. And I will now turn it over to Bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Is this on? Hello? Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Klein, for that good news. Good morning, everybody. My name is Bill Halsey. I'm from Connecticut. I'm the Access to Recovery Project Manager for the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. And here we go. I wanted to give you a little picture of Connecticut before we got the Access to Recovery grant. The state, the department, had limited direct contact with a lot of faith-based providers. We had a rich clinical service network of providers, but we had limited contact with the faith-based providers. In the year 2000, we started funding, in a very small amount of funding, the St. Francis Hospital Pastoral Counseling Training Program. A gentleman by the name of Mark McKinney started training faith leaders and lay people throughout the state. He probably trained 300 to 400, 500 people before Access to Recovery came along. And so when we got the grant in 2004, he was able to call those people and email those people and say, I really think you should come to these meetings. And he established a lot of trust out there. We had many behavioral health providers who had very limited contact with faith-based providers. Many of them, most of them, had no contact with faith-based providers. The collaboration of activities during and still going on under ATR are significant. We have had several meetings with Mark McKinney from St. Francis and state staff with faith-based and community providers from the very beginning of Access to Recovery throughout the whole program of Access to Recovery. And then an interesting thing started to happen. Established behavioral health providers started to recognize that faith and community providers were great referral sources into their system. So they started to talk after meetings and get to know each other. And then similarly, faith and community providers recognized that behavioral health providers were great referral sources for their services. So again, there were these mutual referrals going on. And then, so what we call concurrent clinical and recovery support services were going on, and Access to Recovery was really able to support that. This is the ATR provider profile. This does not include private landlords or stores such as Target and Stop and Shop, but there were 32 clinical providers. One of those was a faith-based provider. And then on our recovery support service side, we had 38 faith-based providers and 48 secular recovery support service providers. We put a huge emphasis in Connecticut on recovery support service providers, as this slide will show you. The majority of our money, I think it's 85% of the dollars, went to recovery support service providers. As I said, we felt we had a very clinically rich environment in Connecticut, so we used this grant to really beef up our recovery support services. This is a breakdown of how we spent our recovery support service dollars. Dr. Klein mentioned housing. Housing is a critical component to sustain recovery in the community. We invested a lot of dollars in housing, helping people, giving them some breathing room so they could go out and look for work. We paid for up to 2 months of their housing, and as you can see, a lot of our money went to housing. This is faith-based specific. These are all the services that faith-based providers provided across the state. Again, very little clinical, a lot of housing, case management, peer-based services, faith counseling, and vocational and educational services. You can see the comparison of secular versus faith-based. 41% of total claims reimbursements went to faith-based providers. And then the client-served comparison, 43% of the participants selected at least one faith-based service. I want to talk a little bit about provider and systems innovations through Access to Recovery. I think one of our presenters mentioned this, that our faith-based and community providers were really good at going out and reaching into the community and finding people that needed help. And you have to remember that these community agencies have been around for a long time, and people are very used to walking in and asking for help. And so what we found was these providers were very good at reaching a new target population. 40% of the ATR recipients had no prior involvement in our service system. They made a significant impact on probation and parole. Some of our target population, a lot of our target population was through the Department of Correction and probation, and so they made a significant impact on those systems that I'll talk about in just a minute. They also, the faith-based providers and community providers, really increased their sophistication through Access to Recovery, through documentation, through invoicing, all of those things that they necessarily didn't want to learn how to do, they had to learn how to do under Access to Recovery to get reimbursement. And then I would also say that there were many providers under Access to Recovery in the very beginning where ATR was the only revenue stream for them. And through a lot of support through CSAT and consultants, they were able to, again, increase their sophistication and go for new revenue streams. Systems innovations, we leveled the playing field. We brought these providers to the table, and again, through reimbursement, we provided a lot of dollars to them to provide very important services. New providers, 38 brand new providers, never had a history with the department, 32 of which were faith-based providers. As I mentioned, significant impact on probation and parole. We embedded case managers at probation, at parole, at correctional facilities to help them with releasing individuals to the community. We helped them with their supervision, their treatment compliance. There are 2 state programs through probation that are now getting increased funding. As a result, they attribute a lot of the result to ATR. Lessons learned. Relationship is absolutely everything, and attitude is everything with meeting with faith-based and community providers. We really saw ourselves as a partner and not a parent. We didn't want to take on that role. The combination of clinical and recovery support services is so critical, and we want to continue that in the next round. We realize that small organizations need a lot of support and help with this program. In a voucher-based system, there's a lot of administrative work to be done, and they need a lot of help to do that. And then also, many faith-based organizations lacked formal governance, and through, again, a lot of support from us, from the department, and from CSAT and consultants, hello Kevin, we talked a lot about governance, and there's been a lot of movement on governance in Connecticut. And there's no turning back now. We've made huge strides forward with the recovery and faith-based providers, and so there's only one way to go, and that's forward. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Michael Duffy, and I'm the state director in the state of Louisiana. And while we're preparing to get the slides up here, I wanted to quickly remind you that we're one of the states in this nation that is in the process of normalizing the concept of recovery. When we talk about a systems transformation, there are huge challenges. I don't want to fail to remind all of us in this room there's the challenge at the state level as well as the federal level. And one of the issues that is important for us to remember is that when we, as the state government, go to faith-based organizations or community faith-based service organizations and say, we're here from the government and we want to help. You know what that response is like. So historically, if you go up the ladder when the federal government comes and says, we're here to help. But I'm here to say to you that the transformation brought about improved relationships between the state and our federal partners, between the state and our local partners. And I think that's extremely important for us to remember when we talk about transformation. Our grant specifically targeted women and adolescents, but post-disaster we opened that targeted population up to just address the increased demands. However, we still served over 54% of that targeted population. Talking and chewing gum. I do think that the philosophical conviction of the state is extremely important when you talk about this type of transition. You know, we've heard from Director Walters, from the head of SAMHSA, Dr. Klein, from Connecticut, the recognition at the state level that recovery, true recovery, is about more than just treatment. It's about safe housing, a safe place to live. It's about a job. I think the former administrator talked about a date on the weekend, or about healthy relationships. But more importantly, those of us at the state level must understand that true recovery is about working a spiritual program. So it was with that thought in mind, in preparation, even prior to ATR, in our state, we made a decision to invest $1.5 million in establishing choice among the faith-based and community-based organizations in our state. So in the 10 sub-state areas in our state, we placed $150,000 as an infrastructure to begin to have a choice of a licensed clinical treatment program. So it was a natural for us to do an outreach to the faith-based community. We believe that that partnership in creating that spiritual environment is one of the true marks of recovery. We also reached out to the nonprofits. We had over 204 providers that participated in Access to Recovery. Of that 204, 141 providers were brand new to public sector treatment and recovery support system. Of that number, 76% were faith-based and community-based organizations. 54% or 56% of the funding went to faith-based organizations in our state. I do think that one of the essential elements is that consistent training and outreach and open communication. One of the challenges that we were forced with as we worked with brand new providers is to put a system in place that created some opportunities for us. So we developed an electronic voucher system that we provided training on. It allowed us to capitate our services, provide almost a fee for service, if you will, with a voucher. It provided us the ability to monitor for both fraud and abuse. It also had built in it, because of the workforce development issues that we all face in this country, a clinical decision support system that helped make certain that we were placing people in the appropriate level of care, as well as receiving the appropriate recovery support services. We had standardized best practices built in the system, as well as making sure that we were able to diagnose the training needs of the workforce. I want to talk just briefly about some of the outcomes. You heard the national outcomes. At the point of discharge, 87% of our folks were abstinent. 97% there was no continued involvement in criminal justice system. 59% were either employed or enrolled in school. 83% involved in social connectedness, stable housing, 59%, and an average length of stay of 121 days. I think this is the greatest aspect of access to recovery. I always talk about, and maybe it's just the terminology here, but that voice crying in the wilderness. And it was the faith-based and community-based organizations in our state that I'm convinced are the response to the fact that in the state of Louisiana, our governor and state legislature actually decided to sustain ATR. So ATR was initially funded at $7.6 million. Next year, because of some braided funding between some one-time dollars that we have through social service block grant dollars, the $9 million in state general fund, and some carryover dollars, we're going to be able to fund that initiative for 1 year at $16 million.
Wow.
Every year after, the state of Louisiana will fund this transformation at $9 million a year. I'm convinced that the transformation has been the key to this last legislative session being the greatest increase in funding in the history of our organization in the state of Louisiana. $29 million increase in 1 year. So I can't say enough good things about ATR. We're excited about being a partner in round 2.
Good morning. 3 years ago, the California Rural American Indian Program embarked upon a revolutionary journey. We wanted to address the huge unmet need for substance abuse treatment and recovery support services among California's American Indians and Alaska Natives, people who are living in both urban and rural areas throughout the state. The approach was revolutionary because for the first time we were able to develop an infrastructure, the center point of which is the voucher management system that addressed the needs of the whole person, however they defined it. Access to recovery opened the door to a whole new way of conceptualizing, funding, and delivering clinical treatment and recovery supportive services by traditional cultural interventionists and paving the way for new collaboration with faith-based and community organizations. From the beginning, there was resounding support for this effort. We received letters of support from over 50 California tribes. This unprecedented cooperation was very significant because Indian families and communities have felt the ravages of substance abuse far more deeply than other groups. According to the Surgeon General, Native Americans are 5 times more likely to die from alcohol-related causes than whites. Alcohol is the leading health issue in Indian country. Other drugs have also hit hard. And in a cruel twist on terrorism, drug-dealing gangs from Mexico and Los Angeles and elsewhere are using our reservations as site for intense sales and distribution of illicit drugs, most recently methamphetamine. Access to a recovery allowed us to support faith-based practices that were never offered a seat at the table, including a coalition of 10 Christian churches in Los Angeles, united in their desire to work together to address these significant problems. Developing this infrastructure was not easy. We had to build trust. It was about persuasion. When we built that trust through a significant outreach effort, we had site visits, hands-on training, and on-call assistance. We learned to listen closely. We listened to those who spoke to us, and we benefited from their wisdom and their ideas. CRIB had to become a learning organization right along with our providers. 43 of our organizations, or in our automated voucher system today, we have 101 treatment and recovery support service organizations. 43 of those organizations are tribal and urban health clinic organizations who often operate as a facilitating organization for many of our faith partners who lack the infrastructure to manage this access to recovery effort. 58 of those organizations are community-based. Access to recovery allowed us to expand the continuum of care, moving us closer to our ultimate goal of sustained recovery by expanding the definition of acceptable services to include spiritual and cultural support. Nearly half of our provider organizations now offer recovery support services not available prior to the Access to Recovery effort. We were able to build a bridge between the sacred and the secular. We were able to build a bridge between Indian healthcare and secular health services to expand real choice for the American Indian Alaska Native population. Our networks continue to grow. 88% of care providers have developed new collaborative relationships with local faith-based and community organizations. Have we been successful? I want to answer that in the words of our clients. Care provided us with a positive path to freedom from drug dependence for ourselves and our family. And another client wrote, "The connection to spiritual aspects of traditional medicine was what I needed to make peace with myself and to recover." During the past 3 years, Access to Recovery, the CARE program, built, sustained, and improved a program that expands access to spiritual and culturally relevant treatment and recovery supportive services to American Indian and Alaska Native people. And for that opportunity, we want to express our deep gratitude.
Thank you very much. We have, I have one question that I'm going to ask before we move on to the next segment. In your comments, it was very clear that some parts of your system had started to move in this direction even before receiving this grant, and that you've also learned a great deal over these last few years. So my question is, what words of advice would you have for the people here or for new grantees or people who want to move their systems closer to this model? What words of advice would you have for them as they move their systems in that direction, as they attempt to transform their systems? Bill, let's start with you and just move down, and then we'll close the segment.
I think all of us touched a little bit on the approach that a government entity could take with faith-based and community providers. From our perspective, it was really reaching out to them and trying to really listen to them and determine what services they provide, how long they have been providing it, what special traits they have or unique characteristics they have, and not coming in and saying, this is how you're going to do it, to the extent that we could do that. There were some aspects of ATR where they had to do things. But besides those, we really tried to listen to them and understand them, who they were as an organization, and then go back and huddle at the state office and say, okay, how do we fit that provider or those providers into the system? So I think flexibility, understanding, and a lot of meetings and very frank and honest discussions with providers.
Thank you. Michael?
I would have to concur that I think communication and relationships is at the heart of any transformation. I think the underlying awareness going into the transformation that is something we've all believed in terms of providing treatment is that somehow or another setting in that, I always refer to it as an artificial circle of group therapy where folks tell you what you want to hear, is a whole lot different than addressing the needs of the whole person. And so I think just that recognition, walking into the fact that you have recovery supports services available in addition to treatment, and the fact that the faith-based and community-based service organizations have an entree into that large number of people that we say don't historically even attempt to access services is a big plus. I've heard Dr. Clark say repeatedly, we have this huge number that we know need help, but they don't access us. But they access our places of faith, and they access those community service organizations. So it's just a great, great partnership. Look forward to it.
And Vicki, the last word is yours.
And I'll have more than one. Communication is absolutely crucial, and relationship is key. And with our providers and our network of providers, we will have a relationship. We've had a relationship with many of them before the Access to Recovery program, and we'll continue to have a relationship after the Access to Recovery funding is over. And so we continually work together to provide or to attend to sustainability. How do we sustain this effort? And it's only through that communication and planning together that that's going to happen. So communication and relationship.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Wesley Clark, and I'm the moderator of the next session. If I could have my panelists join me, and I'll have a few comments, and then we'll have them provide their comments. I'm going to be joined by Laura Mangrum, PhD, Research Sciences, University of Texas Addiction Research Institute, and she's a research scientist at the University of Texas, ARI. She's currently lead evaluator on the Access to Recovery and Co-occurring State Incentive Grant for the state of Texas, as well as a lead evaluator for the Recovery Community Services Project Grant in the state. And also Michael Flaherty, he's Executive Director, Institute of Research, Evaluation, and Training in Addictions, and Executive Director of the Northeast Addiction Technology Transfer Center. Obviously, Dr. Klein just announced that there are a number of grantees in Phase 2. Texas is one. But Dr. Flaherty is also a new grantee for our ATTCs. He's just recently recompeted for the ATTC, so he'll be around for a couple more years too, I assume. You've heard from both Director Walters and Dr. Klein about the importance of ATR, the outcomes of the ATR. So what I'm going to talk about is, if I can get this technology to work for me. Basically, recovery support services, which I think is an important antecedent to any discussion about access to recovery in the faith community. We believe that that discussion of recovery is critical to our processes. We know that it's not just professional treatment that helps people's lives, and as was pointed out by the previous panel, what we need is a continuum of interventions. Treatment is a part of recovery, and the endpoint of treatment is abstinence from the clinical disorder. But the endpoint of recovery is holistic health, as was pointed out before. Recovery support services build on these capacities that already exist within communities. The National Institute of Drug Abuse has long contended that treatment involves a spectrum of services. In that oval, you see some traditional treatment strategies like detoxification, treatment plans, pharmacotherapy, behavioral therapy and counseling, clinical case management, substance use monitoring, and self-help groups. But around that oval, you see a number of what can be classified as recovery-oriented services, and that is child care, family care, vocational services, legal services, HIV, financial services, medical services, mental health services, housing and transportation. We can't think of recovery only in terms of the specialty delivery system. We have to think of recovery as a broad spectrum. Tom Kirk from Connecticut, and you heard from William Halsey from that jurisdiction. Tom Kirk, Connecticut, says traditionally the substance abuse treatment program thought of treatment as addressing the individual as they enter the treatment system and then discharging them. That was, and then what we have though then is a series of discontinuous interventions where we only focus on acute symptoms. And what we need to do is to recognize that while we focus on acute symptoms, that person often relapses, their symptoms get severe. As soon as they remit, we stop seeing them. Whereas in a recovery-oriented system of care, we have a continuous treatment process where the professional delivery system is addressing that period you see in the little red bar. And then what we have is promoting self-care and rehabilitation, which you see in the little blue bars. In other words, what we're trying to achieve is a continuous treatment response, which then returns an individual to a more normalized existence, where we have improved client outcomes, and you heard the previous panel talk about that, and we create a recovery zone where that individual then does not have to relapse in the extreme swings that we see in that individual's course of behavior. So what we are trying to do is promote that. We promote social supports that are critical to long-term recovery, comprehensive services that can greatly assist recovery, peer-based services that are cost-effective strategies to enhance recovery, and federally sponsored programs that can play an important role in understanding ways to design and implement recovery-oriented systems of care. Access to Recovery was a major initiative to do that, but we had a smaller program that sort of preceded ATR, which was our Recovery Services Program, which indeed laid the foundation. It fostered peer-based services that extend and enhance the treatment continuum by helping to prevent relapse, promote long-term recovery, therefore reducing the strain on the overburdened treatment system. Despite the fact that we have a large number of people who don't present to care, the small number of people who do present to care still overburden the system because we have a small delivery system. And we need to minimize the negative effects of relapse through early intervention and timely referral back to treatment, something that Mike Duffy talked about and William Halsey talked about, is the delivery system recognizes the need to treat this individual across the spectrum. These are the types of services that are offered in terms of recovery support services, and these are the kinds of things that faith-based community historically have been addressing, offering emotional support, informational support, instrumental support, and affiliational support. And I like to focus on informational and instrumental support. We expect people to navigate systems like criminal justice system, child welfare system, but they've never done that in their lives. And all of a sudden we expect one day, gee, you're abstinent, you go ahead and navigate the system. It doesn't work. We expect people who have literacy problems to read the big book, to fill out job applications. It doesn't work. So these are activities that the faith community has long been addressing. And one of my first exposures, I'm a board-certified psychiatrist, addiction medicine specialist, and they really didn't think about this. But I went to the Santa Barbara mission one day, and they were telling me about their literacy training program. I said, oh, rescue missions doing literacy training and job management. Well, it made perfect sense as a psychiatrist. Oh, if you can't read, you can't do all these other things. So the faith community is saying, we're dealing with all these other things, which are critical to your outcome, because after all, you keep saying addiction is a chronic relapsing disease, and we know why. So we want to help you out here. So with that, I'm going to turn to our panel members who are going to address some of the academic aspects of realizing outcomes and success, the benefits of recovery-oriented systems of care. You've heard about our new grantees. We've got a bunch of new grantees, and we will be working with the 13 new grantees and the 11 old grantees. The new grantees is D.C., 8 new states and 4 tribal organizations. We've got 11 old grantees, which we will use to help educate our new grantees, 10 states and 1 tribal organization. So we'll start off with our first panelist, and that will be Dr. Mangren. As soon as her slides come up. So we still have to rely on technology. I'm going to sit here and you can use this.
Thank you. I want to start off saying it's an honor to be here today to share this information with the people that are in the trenches and to give you information to show the effects of what you're doing. Also, looking out across the audience, I see people that I collaborate with in Texas, and I also see other people that I collaborate with in other states, and it feels like we're beginning to develop a family nationally that's dealing with the recovery effort. And yes, even evaluators can be part of the family. So I'd like to share with you preliminary outcomes of the Texas Access to Recovery Project. This is just a portion of an interim report that we did for the Texas Access to Recovery Project. Which one is it? Okay, I want to briefly describe the Texas application of ATR. It targets individuals who are involved in the criminal justice system. It initially started with drug court participants, but later was expanded to probationers and individuals who are involved with child protective services with substance use problems. The program provides independent assessment to determine service needs, and it ensures individual choice among an array of service providers that includes both faith-based and community organizations. In the Texas ATR voucher system, this is a list of the different types of services that are provided through the voucher monies. The clinical assessment, care coordination, various forms of addiction treatment, and the rest are the wide array that they provide of recovery support services in addition to treatment. So I'm going to present to you preliminary outcomes of ATR from one section of that report. In this particular section, the study examines outcomes of 825 individuals who received ATR services during the first 15 months of the ATR project. And what we did was we looked at people who were rated by the assessment providers and care coordinators as successful completers of the ATR program and compared those to people who were rated as non-completers on both client and voucher service characteristics. The first thing that we noticed is that people who are complete are retained in the ATR program longer, which is very similar to what we find in substance abuse treatment. So keeping people in the system helps them to have more successful outcomes. This looks at treatment and recovery support service combinations. And what we find here is that people who are successful completers either receive treatment only or treatment and recovery support combinations. Individuals who were more likely to non-complete had higher levels of recovery support services only. In looking at the vast array of recovery support services, you can look at different conceptualizations of the types of services. In this case, what we do is we put them into two categories: direct recovery support services and social supports. Direct recovery support services are those such as peer mentoring, individual recovery coaching, recovery support groups, relapse prevention groups, spiritual support group, life skills, marital family counseling. The social support services are employment coaching, transportation, transitional housing, GED assistance, and child care. So we contrasted the completers and non-completers on these two service types. And the results in this study indicated that completers were more likely to receive the direct recovery support services, whereas the non-completers were more likely to receive social support services. In terms of client characteristics, completers in this study were more likely to be Hispanic, employed, living independently, and to have higher levels of education. When we considered the referral sources to the ATR program, drug court participants had a much higher completion rate relative to probationers and individuals involved with child protective services. So in summary from this particular study, the factors that were associated with successful ATR outcomes were retention and ATR program, receiving treatment only or treatment in combination with recovery support services, and receiving direct recovery support services that seem to be most closely related to the process of recovery, drug court supervision, client employment, and higher education levels. So future research directions. This study considered success as successful completion of the ATR program, and that's only one method of defining outcomes. We need other studies that use a wider array of outcome measures. Studies are needed to explore the effect of various service combinations on client outcomes. For instance, in this study, when we looked at the different types of categories of services, we found some differences. We need to look more closely at that. It's not saying that social support services are not important, but it may be that we need the combination of direct recovery support with social supports, with treatment, which supports the concept of the treatment continuum over time. We also need longitudinal studies to examine the lasting effects of recovery support services on sustaining the process of recovery. I'd like to acknowledge the Texas Department of State Health Services, in particular Karen Els, who is the ATR project director, Leslie San Jose, who extracted raw data for our analyses for this project, and of course Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration for funding Texas again.
Thank you, Dr. Mangrum. Our next presenter will be Michael Flaherty.
I too want to acknowledge that I'm very honored to be here today, not to speak on my behalf, but on behalf of many scientists, many clinicians, and many of the people in recovery whose message I'm going to try to synthesize into just 10 short bullets to talk about the whole science of what recovery and recovery-based care might mean for the future. This is an ominous task. I contacted Stephen Hawking. He could do the whole universe in one volume. We'll try this in a short time. Is it this one? Okay. You have in your packets a great deal of literature that we put in just to give you more background into the research that is now coming forward, the emerging research and the historical research that supports recovery-based models of care with traditional-based scientific research, and what the impact of this might mean going forward. Programs such as ATR being linked to the more traditional understandings of what works and what is effective. What I have in front of you now is a potential perspective, an initial perspective that should be changed over time, 4 or 5 years as we go forward, but that reflects the perspective of individuals in recovery coming into a science now that is saying what works in treatment. And you see in here, most of all, that there's a responsibility for an illness, but it is an illness, fundamentally an illness. And it is best treated with early scientific prevention, intervention, earlier recognition, and then, of course, in its acute stage, the best treatment continuums with linkages to recovery supports. The science is now showing this. What does the science say? Well, these are possibly two of the biggest facts that I could distill from all of the volumes of literature. The first one you may not be as familiar with, but the Institute of Medicine just 1 year ago reported millions of Americans receive health care today for substance dependence. And these conditions combined are the leading cause of disability among women and death among women, and second among men. Even with this statistic, some states, as the one that I come from, just started committees to look at chronic conditions in other illnesses, and you know what condition didn't make the committee meetings. Yet this illness leads to many of those other chronic conditions. So it's time that we bring this science forward that you have in front of you. Treatment is effective, and this statistic is probably the most worn scientific statistic we have, but it was most important because it showed that when given the proper care, the treatment of this illness is as effective or more effective than the other chronic illnesses. And best of all, it can be sustained over time. With that knowledge, we now stand equal to, without shame, with any other body of science with this particular illness. And what else does the science say? The science says that these kinds of reductions can occur with the illness. And with this kind of success in traditional scientific understanding. What will it mean if we bring in the message that you are all carrying today of the recovery support movements and the efforts of linkages to recovery and the improvements with the kinds of belief systems and community involvement? And that's what we'll get to in just a minute. Again, notice in the final statement here, Dr. Hubbard reports, these findings were sustained over 5 years. Can any other chronic continuing care disorder say those same things? And you know, what I've been told by Dr. Wagner and others is we have the best system of support for this illness of any chronic illness in the country, and that diabetes and hypertension and other chronic illnesses can learn from the recovery community in this illness because they don't have the support that's in this room today. Is it cost effective? You betcha. A recent study by Gary Zarkin and others have shown that if you treat the illness in a continuing manner, you can reduce the relapse rates, you can reduce the episodes of care, so much so that there's a $34 to $1 savings over treating it with a revolving door acute model. So with this late data and these new cost offsets, it makes sense for all payers to consider treating the illness in its continuing form. It's cheaper, it saves lives. In the long run, we just have to measure it and be able to account for it. What is recovery? Well, this is a debate and a fight. Many people will define recovery very differently. What you have in front of you now are two definitions. One came from the summit that you have in your little book today that in 2005 was handed to you, where a group of people from recovery and CSAT led to a conversation. And the definition of recovery in alcohol and drugs is a process of change, which we all would agree to, where the individual achieves abstinence, health, wellness, and a quality of life. And the key phrase is the quality of life. The second definition was a result of a panel that was held about a year ago at the Betty Ford Center. And I added their definition, just part of it again, and both of these are partial definitions. If you look in your book, you'll see much more added to it, which give us the principles of recovery. And as we sit down with our insurers and payers, we think about those principles, we'll be fine, because we can always rise above the difficulties when we have the principles of the consumer getting well at heart. And that's the change in the paradigm, from pathology to wellness. In this second definition, you'll see that the measures that the World Health Organization uses to measure recovery would include a spiritual measure. Now, if the world can go about measuring spirituality and recovery, so should we. And that's what the World Health Organization is saying to the individual recovery. What does the recovery research tell us so far? Well, you're hearing about the great work of the ATRs and all of the work that they're bringing forward now that can be used. And all of that knowledge is priceless to those of us in the treatment field, because we now can see the positive effects. But with recovery support, you can increase the entry and involvement in treatment. Science has shown that definitively. Most treatment, if you will, is done outside of some treatment agencies. It's done in the community, and when somebody has chronic relapsing rates, etc., this is often done in a 12-step group. This is often done with peer supports. They're always there, so this is something we have to learn from. Care can be the basis for peer care, shown so effective by these ATR programs and others. By the way, this data was based on other than ATR data, so the ATR data is just supporting it, enhancing it. Or other low cost, this care is free or low cost oftentimes. It brings community together and involvements. It reduces chronicity. The average 8 relapses come down to 5. Any one of those can save $1 million. It goes on. Research from the ATR, this is just a summary of the data that when I was looking at the findings that were being presented today, I just summarized them. You add this to those traditional findings that we had at the very beginning, and you start to see the added success rates and the reason for optimism. What are the questions? Where should research go now? What do we need to understand? Well, let's talk about how does recovery begin and where does it begin? Does it happen in an office or does it happen in a community? Does it happen in a home? Does it happen in a jail? These are the questions we have to start to ask and understand. This is what brings it home. And then we can tie that to the traditional research. Once recovery begins, how do we sustain it? Does it change for different populations? What's the difference about adolescents? What makes them work? What doesn't make them work? Understand focus groups. Get into qualitative research. And why is it not working for some? These are just a few questions. What sustains recovery and differ from other kinds of modes of treatment and recovery? It's really going at the perspective of the person in recovery, bringing that perspective into the science so we can understand and embrace that science. One day, all Americans then will begin to see the value of the quality healthcare system that we have by its measure of successes and not just by its darknesses of its failures. And when we get that success, we will do it through recovery. When all the field practitioners and policymakers and researchers use this understanding together with the science, practice prevention, early intervention, treatment, and linkage to recovery, we will completely change and lead to a previously unimagined, more effective method of treatment and recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mangrum and Dr. Flaherty. I have one question. What advice would you give the second phase of ATR grantees regarding both traditional services and recovery support services?
Well, given the preliminary evidence from our studies, and I only gave one of our studies. We have a larger report that has a number of different studies within it. There is a strong trend to make sure you look at what kinds of combinations of services people are receiving. If they're only receiving social support services without any other type of recovery support or treatment, our evidence is showing that that's not really working very well. I will also say that in the COSIG, that I'm also the lead evaluator for the co-occurring state incentive grant, which also has recovery support services. I'm seeing very similar trends in the importance of peer mentoring and recovery coaching as really assisting people to complete treatment and having higher abstinence rates.
Michael?
With every success comes a greater responsibility. Think of yourselves as what you're going to mean for the future. Look at your programs and document your success. Give your leadership the accountability it needs, study your work, understand what works for consumers, and build the linkages of recovery supports into your formal treatment so that we can all learn from that message and take it forward after that.
And I'd like to wind up with acknowledgement. This is our 18th annual observance of National Alcohol and Drug Addiction Recovery Month. September is Recovery Month, and our theme this year is Join the Voices of Recovery, Saving Lives, Saving Dollars. And I'm really pleased that the faith community is participating in our effort to save lives and save dollars. Thank you.
Indeed, it's a great day. I'm so excited about being here among all you great men and women who every day fight for the lives of those who are addicted to drugs and alcohol or any kind of destructive behavior. I am Tanja Miles. I'm from the great state of Louisiana. My husband and I are co-founders, and I'm the CEO of Set Free Indeed Ministry and Free Indeed Treatment Center. Again, I'm so excited, and congratulations to all of you new ATR states. Louisiana, this is our second round, and we're just so excited that we continue to serve people, day in and day out through ATR, Access to Recovery. I bleed this. I love this, what I do. 20 years ago, I was addicted to cocaine and all other kind of drugs, so I know firsthand how addiction kills, steal, and destroy. Over 15 years now, my husband and I have been blessed to serve people with addiction and destructive behavior. And in our treatment facility, I get to see every day, day in and day out, that recovery is real. So right now, the Bible says give honor to where honor is due. And I tell Mr. Duffy this all the time. I'll see him sometime, and he's on the state level, and he's fighting, for the faith and community-based organization so we can go out there and do what we do best, and that's, get people, free from drug and alcohol and get them on the road to recovery. And I tell him, I said, you know what? I said, Mr. Duffy, when you having one of those days when you're going, what am I doing here? Man, I'm just beat down, from just all the stuff. And I said, won't you just come to the clinic sometime and just look around, and you'll get to see firsthand your work. You get to see firsthand your labor. So right now, I'd just like to give a shout out and a special thanks to everybody in here, from the federal level to the state level, faith and community-based organizations. You guys rock. So give yourselves a hand, and those who sit next to you. In 2003, when President Bush began to talk about ATR and he addressed it at the State of the Union address, I was really fortunate that he used my life story in our program as a program that did amazing work but did not get, any federal funds. And shortly after that, we were again blessed, my husband and I and our great staff, to open up Louisiana's first faith-based licensed treatment center. And it's just been a great journey. We look forward to helping more people. Again, I know firsthand how ATR works. Recovery is real. And so if there's anything from the state of Louisiana that we can do to help any of you new grantees, please call them on us. I'm sure Mr. Duffy has a lot of great information he wanted to share with you. Again, thank you all for being here this morning. There are many great stories in this room, and there are a lot of people who do amazing work on the front line. And this morning, we're really, really, really fortunate to have some of the best, some of the brightest, who are on the front lines every day dealing with people. They're transforming lives in their communities. And at this time, I would like for them to introduce themselves in their own way and tell you a little bit about who they are and what they do, and just share some of the ups and downs of the challenges they go through every day. My first panelist here, you can introduce yourself. And again, we're just grateful to have you guys.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Morning. My name is David Whiters, and I'm from Atlanta. I work with an agency called Recovery Consultants of Atlanta, and I'm excited about being here, a little nervous, but nevertheless excited. I'm going to talk to you about one of our faith-based grants. We have 2 grants from CSAT. One is an HIV prevention grant, the other is the Recovery Community Support Program grant, and they're both funded as faith-based grants. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about one of our grants. I do want to start with just a brief overview of how we got started. Our program was created in 1999. It was founded by 3 brothers. We were all in recovery. This is where I get to self-disclose. In recovery more than 23 years. I was 26 years old when I got clean. I used heroin for half of my life when I got clean. I was injecting heroin the past 10 years of my life when I got clean. So by God's amazing grace, I'm here today. I also like to add to that the last time I used, I remember so well, was as if it was yesterday. There were 3 of us. There were 2 brothers, one of whom was my nephew and the best friend I ever had in my life. That night, July 17th, 1984, we shared 1 set of syringes between the 3 of us. My nephew, in 1991, died from complications due to AIDS. My other best friend is doing 25 years to life, and I'm neither HIV infected nor am I in prison. So I just want to thank God for allowing me to be here today. I certainly didn't say that for applause, but I do just want to kind of qualify who I am and how we got started. 3 of us graduated, had earned our graduate degrees. I earned a GED, an undergraduate degree, and a graduate degree as a result of my personal recovery. One had flunked out of a historically black college in Atlanta and was later reaccepted, went on to earn a graduate degree, and one earned his graduate degree at HBCU in Atlanta. And the 3 of us got together and said we wanted to help other brothers and sisters in recovery pursue formal degrees, and that's how our program started. Evidence of things unseen. None of us would have ever predicted where our program would have evolved to. This was not in our plan. The very first person we helped get into school, we helped him fill out his application on the hood of a car after an NA meeting. That was our office. But today we've just grown tremendously, and we now have a wonderful agency that has over 11 full-time employees. We offer what we think to be some very wonderful programs. We like to make sure that the phrase peer-led is added in front of recovery support services, because we want to make sure that people know that we advocate that at least the majority of these services should be provided by individuals who self-identify as people in long-term recovery. They're not intended to replace treatment. That's not what we're not in competition with treatment. We actually augment treatment. One of our major referral sources are treatment centers, and we have been very successful at getting treatment centers to see how important it is for us to work together in providing the services that we provide. We provide a ton of wonderful services. This is one of those slides from hell. I can't see it from here, so I'm just going to have to guess, and I don't want to turn around and look, so I just have to guess. I just want to talk about a couple of the services. And what you need to know is almost all of the peer-led recovery support services we provide are provided in partnership with churches. What we've discovered is that churches in Atlanta have historically been the leading provider of social support services. They've been doing this far longer than any of us. When we came along and started talking about the things we want to do, they said, oh, we've been doing that for 100 years. We didn't know that. What we've been successful at doing is bridging the gap that exists between individuals who are members of 12-step recovery and the church. What we discovered is that we both provide or have desires to provide the same kind of services to the same population of people. Our target population happens to be homeless inner-city substance users. In Atlanta, that means that more than 90% of them, more than 96% of them are African American, more than 70% have multiple felony convictions. Somewhere between 3 and 4% live with HIV infection. We estimate that close to 100% live with chronic hepatitis C. And they meet HUD's definition for chronically homeless, which means they've been homeless at least 3 times in the last 4 years. That's our target population. We, for example, decided to create this support group that's kind of faith-based in nature. Not kind of, it's Celebrate Recovery. Many of us are familiar with it, as an alternative to 12-step support. For those of us who wanted a support environment that was profanity-free and allowed us to openly and honestly talk about our relationship with God. We thought that was important. Well, it started out very small. We got a call from a treatment center. They wanted to know if they could send their clients. It was a women and children treatment center. We said absolutely. Well, one night when we were meeting, about 20 women walked in the door, and each of them had on average 2.5 kids. And we then realized how selfish we were, and we really hadn't planned for this meeting to include this type of population of people. And we had this conversation with the pastor of the church, who asked us, how did they get there? And we said, well, they traveled by bus. And he said, what a shame. He said, we had 3 vans, do absolutely nothing on Friday night except collect dust. Why don't we identify volunteers from amongst our congregation who could serve as transporters? They would pick them up and bring them to the support group. And we said, how's that for a wonderful idea? And then he asked us about the children. And we said, well, what about the kids? He said, well, what do they do while you had the meetings? We said, they run around, they distract us, they make it real difficult for us to concentrate. They're more of a nuisance than anything. He said, what a shame. He said, I have an empty room that does absolutely nothing on Friday night, and several members among my congregation who are experts at working with children. Why don't we provide a simultaneous support system for them while you're having a support group? And we said, what a wonderful idea. Well, little did we know that that night we addressed 2 barriers that make it most difficult for single parents to access support groups. One is lack of transportation, the other one is the absence of child care. So this program continues to evolve. And again, I told you earlier that we later found in the literature, if you study many of the leading African-American scholars who study religion, you'll find out that the services that we're trying to develop and provide have been provided in the past by leading churches. I just want to kind of bring this presentation to closure with these pictures. I want to show you that we have a group of guys who go out in the community, and we mobilize homeless drug users into treatment as a peer-led recovery support service. We then put them in transitional housing. Now, I need to tell you that the same church asked us, what do we do with these guys once they come out of 7-day detox? And we said they generally go back to the community where they're used. He said, what a shame. And they went out, leased 4 apartments that we now use to house the brothers who come out of the streets and go and detox. And while they live in apartments, they go to outpatient treatment. I also want to tell you, too, that we have a program that I'm really proud of. It's called Recovery at Work. It's a social entrepreneur program that we created. Most of the men we work with, I told you, have multiple felony convictions. I don't know how many of you know, but having multiple felony convictions makes it difficult to access employment. We created our own employment. We created a program that's called Recovery at Work. We employ more than 30 guys full-time. We've cornered the market on things like roofing in Atlanta. We had the best prices. Nobody can beat our prices. And to kind of bring this to closure, just recently, well, it's been more than a year now, we signed a contract for more than $200,000 to tear down, rebuild, and stain 440 wooden fences at a condominium complex just south of Atlanta. We got that contract partially because we're good at what we do, but more importantly, because of our faith-based affiliation. The woman who gave us that contract was a member of a church who heard about the wonderful work that we did, and because of that network, they contacted us and offered us the contract. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. What an awesome program. Thank you so much. Thank you. Totally amazing work. Our next panelist is Peter Daniels. He's the Executive Director with A New Entry Incorporated.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Pete Daniels. I'm the ED of A New Entry out of Austin, Texas. And it's a great honor and privilege to be here today. I just want to thank people for recognizing us and getting us here and giving us this opportunity to speak. I also want to recognize our family members who put up with a lot of what it is that we do. And I have the privilege to bring my wife with me today. She's back in the audience back there. And she, you want to wave your hand, honey? She puts up with a lot of the effort, energy that's necessary in making this thing happen with a new entry. And there's a lot of people, family members, who may not quite have the full vision as those of us who are serving directly do. And just want to say thank you to all those people. Faith-based. It's the evidence of things unseen, as we saw in one of the previous slides. And we really look at the people that we're working with and we say there's something here that hasn't manifested yet, that hasn't been delivered, that hasn't come up. Our organization works with individuals who are coming directly out of incarceration, who may be chronically homeless and substance dependent. And so that is a very potentially needy population. It's the most disenfranchised, as we heard from some of the previous presenter, Dave. It's a tough population to work with. It's tough for them to re-enter into community and get back involved with the mainstream, become citizens again. And sometimes maybe they were never citizens. So you talk about rehabilitation, but what about habilitation? We really haven't got to a point where we're able to be self-sustaining and successful. Our mission is to work with those individuals and help them to understand they have a calling and on their lives, that there's a God-given call on their lives. So we can provide treatment, we can provide services, we can do a lot of outputs, for individuals, but really what we want to do is instill in them or help them recognize there's an intrinsic motivation that can be birthed and grown within them. So that's a big part of our vision, is to see everybody that's been impacted by homelessness, incarceration, or substance abuse or dependence, to understand what their true vision, passion, and calling is in their life. And those individuals who are part of our organization, our staff, they've all come to that realization at that point. If you've read my bio, I used to be an engineer, and I had a different life course and different life path than I'm on right now. It was when I became awakened, took some time to understand what was my purpose, what was my calling, that I began to understand that I wasn't really fulfilling what God had intended for me to do. And now, even though I earned a factor less than what I did as an engineer, I'm far more at peace with what it is that I do on a daily basis. And that's what we want to do, is we want to encourage individuals to have understanding of direction, where they're going. And I've made mistakes, I've had issues in my life, and instead of burying those, eliminating those, I've made them a part of what it is that I do now. And so I don't have to take those things that were the worst part of me and the worst part of what I did and eliminate them or alienate them. I bring them in. Paul in his writings talked about, I boast in my weakness. And so a lot of the people that we deal with, we need to make sure they understand that what's gone before can be a part of what goes forward for them. They can be fueled by that, those issues and those problems. I used to teach a study called The Making of a Superhero. And if you look at the lives of a lot of the superheroes, they all begin with tragic circumstances, loss or devastation or something, and then something great comes of that. And so we do believe that the people we work with are superheroes, and we just need to help them see that and realize that in different ways. Our organization, my intentions when I went back to school and got a master's in social work was to become a counselor for people who were like me, suffering from early midlife crisis and trying to figure out, how to begin again. And so, but my first job as an intern was dealing with homeless individuals, and I'd not intended to do that. But then you begin to realize as you deal with people who are different than ourselves that they're not all that much different at all. Yes. And then my calling was to work directly with men. I knew that. Well, there are men in prison. And so I took a job working as a case manager, and then realized these men had issues that needed help. I was detoured from my initial thought. I was paying my therapist $90 an hour. I was like, this is where I want to go. But then, God had a different plan for me. And so, I'm temporarily sidetracked and detoured and really helping those people who are the most needy amongst us. Our organization began without access to recovery funding, even though we heard a lot of organizations through ATR have got launched from that. Fortunately, we did do that. ATR has been of great benefit in terms of the expansion of our service offerings, in terms of multiplying the amount of housing that we can provide, and we've done that through some innovative ways with some partners. But we existed before, and that was a good thing, because with the influx of the resources that come from ATR come great responsibility. And if an organization like ours is not careful, they can develop programs specifically on the ATR funding and find themselves in trouble if funding is cut off. You've dealt with this infrastructure, the staff, these great programs, but then all of a sudden you have to dismantle a lot of that. And our organization is such that we're not necessarily tied with a church, and so you know, we wouldn't have that immediate support. So our organization is finding ways to diversify, to get more grounded in the community, even though we are providing these services already. I just wanted to read a little bit. Received a call, but before that I received a letter from this individual who we've been working with for over a year, and relationship is such an important thing. You have treatment, and that's a clinical, medical, you know, approach to things, but then you have a relationship, which is really what the faith-based organizations are about. And this gentleman gave me permission to share and to say his name is Dave Harvey. And he wrote a 6-page front and back letter. I'm not going to read all that. It says, I'm so deeply grateful for the housing opportunities you provided for me in the past and future. He's currently in treatment again. I believe from my own experience, the residential recovery houses, such as the houses you provide for recovering addicts, is vital for sustained long-term recovery for the following reasons. I, and most of us in recovery, lack many skills, living skills, money management, hygiene, work ethics, communications, etc. A structured environment is crucial. The ability to reside in a drug-free, safe environment that is structured in recovery truly offered me a chance. It's not enough to simply work a program, as they say. It's imperative that I live it. Living in a surrounding conducive and supportive of my recovery is an extension of treatment. Wow. And he says that, he goes on to say, that it's not about being apart from, which a lot of times we're trying to separate people from drugs and alcohol. It's about being a part of. That's right. So bringing into a community, into a relationship, and it's such a big deal. And we're faith-based providers because we derive a lot of our drive from spiritual material. And there's a story in the Bible that talks about a man cleaned up his house. The demon that was in his house was sent out and went to and fro over land and water and decided, hey, let me go back to my old house and see what's going on there. Went back. House was still clean, so he brought 7 more of his bad buddies with him. And so the point of that is we can help people clean up their lives, and we can help people, you know, we can help them get to a place where they're ready to receive something else. But if they don't, then we run the risk of other things coming back in, maybe even more negative, more powerful in their lives. So thank you for giving me a chance to share today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Peters. I tell you, you know, these roundtables are so informative, and the information that's disseminated in this building today is just, it's just priceless. It's so funny, you know, the Bible says confess your sins one to another, and as being a provider, you know, it's hard not to stand up here and not to write stuff down that people are doing, especially with the RAW, Recovery at Work. I'm like, why didn't I think of that? But I'm not going to take your stuff. You know, I hope you got it copyrighted, though.
I'm taking your stuff.
I mean, just so much good information, and thank you guys so much for sharing. We've already heard some amazing stories from Ramey, but we want to hear some more information from Ms. Linda Leathers, that she's the CEO of The Next Door.
How often do you have in life the opportunity to say thank you? Really deep-seated thank you for the people who make it happen. And so I just want to say from the faith-based office, thanks for really setting a place at the table for organizations like ours to be able to provide thousands and thousands of people around the country services, because we really believe life can be different. So thank you so much. See, we were watching. We were watching that State of the Union address when our president mentioned recovery. Wow. Could we one day be a part of that? Because we were the wild group of praying women.
Come on.
We were. There you go. We were the wild group of praying women who were looking for the best fit of a building that was sitting empty in the middle of downtown Nashville. It's 22,000 square feet. We did a community needs assessment. You know what we found? There were gaps in the services in Middle Tennessee for women. Women who needed desperate help with addiction. Women who had mental illness. Women who had trauma. They needed a place of safety and security, of hope in which they could come and live and get back on their feet, which they could believe again that life could be different. We went to the jails because we heard that women coming out of incarceration, where'd they go? Well, we went to the jail and we asked the warden, and he spent his time with us, and he said when a woman comes out of incarceration, when she's paid her dues to society, she's ready to be released, you know, as well as I do now, she'll go right back to her old playgrounds, her old neighborhoods, her old addictions. It's called recidivism, Ms. Leathers, he said to us. So we at that point began to get this great vision. We believe, given by God, we want to be the next door. We want to pick them up at their point of great crisis. We want to bring them to the next opportunity in life because we believe, by God's grace and mercy, quality services, caring relationships, life can be different. That's the next door. And that enters then access to recovery. We really found out very early on that of the women who came in our door, we opened in May of 2004. now serving over 360 women. All of the women, well, 99%, the other one didn't admit it, but she had an addiction. She had an addiction. The drug of choice at the next door was crack cocaine. Now methamphetamine is coming on strong. They were going to have a mental illness so many times. 65% of the women who walk through our door have a mental illness, diagnosed with mental illness. What was heartbreaking enough to know, they were not being served. They were not getting the right treatment or right medication. Interestingly enough, 85% of the women who walk through our door, you will understand this, had a trauma in the past. Many times abuse as children, never been treated. You know what? There were also women that had poverty issues, generational poverty, and then generational criminal history. So we realized if we were really going to put together a model that was evidence-based, best practices, we needed to have a comprehensive view. Access to recovery, recovery support services brought that to reality for us. Not for us, but for the residents in which we serve, because that's what it's all about. So from housing to case management to relapse prevention groups to drug testing, you name it, Access to Recovery provided the door for our women to get the hope and the healness in which we are striving with them to get. We realized we were going to have a multidisciplinary approach. It's going to take case managers, if it's going to take faith-based, if it's going to take secular, you name it. How can we put together the right combination of success for our residents? Licensed professional counselors, volunteers, social workers, psychiatric nurse practitioners, all of them coming together. Access to Recovery made that happen. With our emphasis on training up a generation of master's level students at 8 universities who bring their interns into the next door, we believe we are training up a new generation with the help of Access to Recovery to understand the needs of women coming out of incarceration, to understand the women who are really struggling and want recovery, because we believe recovery is possible at the next door. With the help of Access to Recovery, we are looking forward, with the great help of Longhorn Steakhouse. They donated us a kitchen. We want to start the food preparation and training center because we realized, as Dr. Clark has mentioned and so many others mentioned, that jobs follow prosperity. We must give the women opportunities to live and work and be responsible. We do not need to enable them or create an entitlement for them. We need to equip them. And jobs help equip, jobs help recovery. So we're excited about the opportunity of opening this cottage industry, potentially, to give them living wage jobs with benefits, which is what we're after. We realized, as a best practice model, we needed everyone at the table. Community partnerships, government funding, NA, AA, foundations, corporations, you name it, everybody at the table. And we have found that to be such a tremendous team together, not dependent on any one source, but dependent on all sources. We first heard, be wary of government funding. We're a faith-based organization. Be wary. Oh, that was so far from the truth in our situation. I want you to know we have found Access to Recovery to be a freeing, expansion-building opportunity for our organization. We have received tremendous training, from sustainability to marketing to relapse prevention work, you name it, our staff's received training. We embrace monitoring. They said, you know, the government will come in, they'll take over. Well, no, we embrace it because monitoring helps us be a better organization. As a faith-based organization, it helps us prove we are what our core values, we're living out our core values. We teach that to our residents. Now we get a chance to show the government and show other granting organizations that we want to exceed your high expectations. We are an organization that is mission-driven. We will not run for the money. We want money will follow mission. So we must have a clear mission, and we will find the funding. That's our mission. And interestingly enough, we are an organization that's based on core values. So many of you are also. Our core values at the Next Doors, we believe that a woman, God's got a plan and purpose for a woman that's good. You know, we serve women, now women and children. We believe there's hope in any situation. Never give up. We believe that a community, we're building a community that we are actually contributing to, not self-sabotaging one another. We're helping one another. We're helping one another be respectful. We're helping one another be encouraging. And we're helping each other understand faith and where that fits into life. It's impossible to respect other people if you don't respect yourself. So Access to Recovery and the life skills and the job skills have helped women understand that they can respect themselves again. It's nothing like seeing a woman come in and be able to give back because she believes in herself, just as Ramey said today. Man, that was awesome, Ramey. You're an example of hundreds and thousands of people in which Access to Recovery is working. We're so proud of you. We find women doing something good and we brag on them because so many times they've been beaten down all their lives. We will work to do that. We believe that helps in their recovery. And then faith. Faith is central to everything we're about, but no one's forced to believe there. We don't believe that's in our core values or what Christ would do. He gives them opportunities. He gives them all kind of opportunities in which they seek out their road. I will tell you that we believe Access to Recovery has been access to opportunity for women. We believe Access to Recovery has been access to transformation for women at the next door. We have seen decreased recidivism. Oh, the outcomes are so promising. We're seeing safer communities. We're building resilience and support for a recovery lifestyle. We do believe it's possible. We actually think it's probable. So we really believe that they can do this with the help of the support. We want mothers to be the role models that their children so desperately need. We're looking for prosperity for each woman, which means meaningful employment. We really want them to be responsible, which would they can be proud of themselves and maintain healthy relationships and maintain quality housing. Family systems will be strengthened and are strengthened as a result of Access to Recovery. In closing, Access to Recovery, again, has been just a catalyst for transformation in Nashville, Tennessee. And I can't say how grateful we are. It has helped us build capacity. We realize